I want to take a few minutes to look at the situation in Ukraine and the efforts, diplomatic and otherwise, to stop a war from escalating and blowing up into a big war in Europe. Sophia Gaston joins me, Director of the British Foreign Policy Group. Good afternoon to you, Sophia.
Good afternoon.
Diplomacy is... well, it looks nervous from where I'm standing. The build-up is going on and sanctions are there and, you know, in the background, and more are threatened. But we don't seem to be making much progress, do we?
Yes, well, it's a difficult one because on one hand, we're trying to sort of ensure that these diplomatic kind of off-ramps are still there and sort of trying them from all sorts of different directions. At the same time, you know, we obviously need to have as much as possible a united show of force. And we also need to be preparing our defenses because Russia themselves are continuing to escalate their presence along the Ukrainian border and in occupied Ukraine at the moment. They're also moving into places like Belarus, and we've seen joint military exercises conducted over recent days as well, which are blocking strategic ports and things. So I think on a military level, it does feel as though things are continuing to escalate and becoming increasingly tense and fragile. On a diplomatic level, it's a little bit more sclerotic, and that's partly because Moscow doesn't feel like it's getting what it wants at the moment, but it's also partly because it's taken the West a little bit of time to get our act together.
And what does it want?
Well, I think, you know, there's things that Putin feels that he can achieve without any kind of invasion, and then there's the invasion itself. I mean, I think, you know, in terms of what he could achieve beforehand, and I think it's fair to say some of this he already has, you know, I think there's two key prongs. One is he's obviously trying to open up negotiations about the European security settlement. And that's partly around these questions of Ukraine's possible future membership of NATO. He's also still trying to fight historical battles about countries like Poland and Hungary, which have joined as post-Soviet states. He's also trying to sort of renegotiate some of the more recent agreements that have been put in place after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2014. The other thing, of course, though, that he's really trying to do, and I think on this he has been succeeding to some extent, is to demonstrate that the West is really struggling to come up with completely unified positions on a lot of these matters.
It was very striking, wasn't it, that in the Winter Olympics, in that opening ceremony, the West very pointedly did not send people, and Putin was there for Russia. He didn't send a representative, didn't send ambassadors or junior ministers. He showed up himself. That was very much about messaging, wasn't it?
It was. And I mean, I think, you know, it's worth noting that on the West, in terms of diplomatic boycotts, you know, again, we weren't all singing from the same hymn sheet there. We, you know, Britain joined the United States, Australia, and a few other countries in choosing to pursue a formal diplomatic boycott. Other Western countries were a little less skeptical of the value of that. But yes, of course, so Putin was in town in part because he had a rather extraordinary meeting with China's President Xi about international relations, in which they've set out some new kind of accords and agreements and alignment that I think the West should be watching rather closely. How
would you interpret the arrival of Russian troops in Belarus, in the northwest, or to the northwest of Kiev, very close to Kiev?
Yes, well, the leader of Belarus has obviously been wreaking a bit of havoc on the European Union over recent months, certainly precipitating a migration crisis, which, of course, then caused a lot of consternation within the EU and a lot of scrambling to respond to that. Putin was watching that quite closely and happily. He's well aware that his relationship with Belarus there on the EU's doorstep is a lever that he can pull just to sort of really maximise the tension. And obviously his hope there is to cause chaos and expose further divisions in the EU if he can, but also just to sort of try and push things as much as possible to the brink so that stakes feel as high as possible.
Thanks, Sophia. Always good to have you on the programme. Thanks very much indeed, Sophia Gaston, Director of the British Foreign Policy Group. Let's get back to